This video series concerns Michel Welbeck's Atomized. This is a rarity for me, a novel written during my lifetime. Welbeck is one of France's great novelists. He is called the bad boy of French literature because his novels seem to describe the rise of nationalism in France and elsewhere. His novels depict the effects of neoliberal economics on national environments. His novels also depict the effects of the sexual revolution on relations between the sexes. Many of the people are disaffected by both of these movements. The politics of global unity through the free market and the politics of diversity through the attempt to deconstruct the family. Welbeck takes their claims very seriously. He gives pictures of those who are involuntary celibates. He depicts the losers in the modern economy. One of his novels shows the rise of Islam within France due to the fact that nobody in France will stand up for France except those who are too distasteful. So his books are about what we should widely see as Western decadence. But he is no Christian, it appears. His criticisms of Western decadence, however, appear to be in the name of love. One of the chief problems of Western decadence is that it compromises the human ability to genuinely love. He despairs of love in the free market. That is one of the themes in his first novel, which is often translated whatever in English. He takes love seriously as a theme and as a human concern. People look for it under these conditions, but cannot find it. And this does sound a little Christian, I must admit. Consider one important line in Atomized, our book here. The hedonistic worldview and the force that shaped the consciousness and his desires were common to an entire generation. Interesting. This suggests that liberation is an ethic. People are not free to choose whatever it is they want. Instead, the environment shapes the consciousness and the desires of all. We are made to desire a certain amount of sex. Sex is expected in a certain context. The how, when, how much, with whom are all part of a sexual constitution. We honor something about sex in our context, and that is very important. And what is honored? Well, that is what Atomized is about. But the context is not simply sexual. There is an economic element to it as well. Can people, and especially men, support themselves and do great things under our conditions? Under the old economy, the answer was yes. They could build a small business and thrive, and therefore have the respectability to build a family. Under the neoliberal order, this is all compromised. Wages go down for many, but extraordinarily up for a few. This is one of Welbeck's first themes in his novel Whatever from 1994. In that novel, his main character, Harold, cannot get any girly action on the road, or much action at all anywhere. He thus muses about his condition as follows. In societies like ours, sex truly represents a second system of differentiation, completely independent of money. And as a system of differentiation, it functions just as mercilessly. Just like unrestrained economic liberalism, and for similar reasons, sexual liberalism produces phenomena of absolute pauperization. Some men make love every day, others 5 or 6 times in their life or never. Some make love with dozens of women, others with none. It's what's known as the law of the market. In a totally liberal economic system, certain people accumulate considerable fortunes. Others stagnate in unemployment and misery. In a totally liberal sexual system, certain people have a varied and exciting erotic life. Others are reduced to masturbation and solitude. Economic liberalism is an extension of the domain of the struggle, its extension to all ages and all classes of society. Sexual liberalism is likewise an extension of the domain of struggle, its extension to all ages and all classes of society. Businesses fight over certain young professionals. Women fight over certain young men. Men fight over certain young women. The trouble and strife are considerable. End of the quote. So these themes, economic liberalization and sexual liberalization, are connected. Both create winners and losers. Can the losers be happy? Heck, can the winners be happy? Can anyone be happy? Was the old order better? Where is the new order going? These are all pertinent questions. The central action of Atomized concerns two brothers, Michel and Bruno. These are brothers from the same mother, but they have different fathers. But neither really had a father or a mother. Thus the story of the sexual revolution. Why did the parents leave their children? And what happened to the children as a result? What kind of family life or love life would the children themselves live with without an example set in the home? Bruno and Michel are almost at the tail end of this rolling revolution. They are the third generation we see in the book. Now, this book has 3 parts and an epilogue. Part 1 is called The Lost Kingdom, and it provides a glimpse of life before the sexual revolution while showing its emergence. We see grandparents and their children, and the grandparents were born around the turn of the century from the 1800s to the 1900s, while Michel and Bruno's parents are born in the 1920s. Part 2 is called Strange Moments, and it depicts the life mostly of Bruno but also of Michel after they are adults. Michel and Bruno were born in the late 1950s during what we know as the baby boom. They came of age in the 1970s. We see that in that part of their life in Part 1. In Part 2, we see Michel and Bruno as adults in the 1990s when they are in their 30s, sexually mature, in their careers such as they are, and it shows us the fruit of their upbringing. Part 3 is called Infinite Emotional. Here we have the end game for Michel, both in his personal life and mostly in his professional life. His girl is dead, if we can call her his girl, and he leaves his job for greener pastures, leaving France for Ireland. He creates a new kind of human being as a result of his research, it seems. His accomplishments are discussed posthumously in the epilogue, and it is a very short epilogue. So quite obviously, the book concerns generations, their economic and sexual hopes of generations. We see the grandparents come from the turn of the century. We see the greatest generation parents who lived through the war and came out the other side as still fecund adults. And these are the parents of Bruno and Michel. Welbeck labels the parents of Bruno and Michel precursors. They are the precursors of the sexual revolution, living according to its ethic before it became society's ethic. They are also precursors to the neoliberal market economy, making a living in new ways besides the old productive manufacturing wave. And then we see Bruno and Michel, the children of the baby boom. They are early products of the sexual revolution. They experience its effects before others because their parents were precursors. The chickens of the sexual revolution come due in society a little later than it did for Bruno and Michel, say the children born in the 1970s and 80s. But they see it more than most. We also get a glimpse of the generation after Bruno and Michel in the novel. But there are not too many members of that generation. Not too many, in fact. We only meet 2, I think, by name. These would be kids born in the 1980s and 1990s, when the family had been destroyed for a couple of generations and the world of the free market had existed for 1 generation. So 4 generations we see. The first with connections to the old world. The second, the precursors, fixing to usher in a new world. And a third of our main characters living without the support of parents in a revolutionary world. And then a fourth, not knowing anything at all about the old world. Let me say that the list of dead bodies in this book is quite impressive. The grandparents die, as seems natural. The mother dies, as is mostly natural since the book ends in the late 1990s. In the main generation, Bruno and Michel's generation, Michel's almost love dies of suicide. Bruno's kind of love dies of suicide. Michel dies of what appears to be suicide. Suicide never really suggests happiness or contentment. There is a profound sadness in that generation in the book. Michel never marries. Bruno marries and has a child but divorces. Michel's almost lover never marries and has 3 abortions. Bruno's almost lover has a child but commits suicide. All of this seems important. One more thing. Welbeck's book is really, really raunchy. He uses words to describe sexual organs that I would never use on a family book series and never use in polite company, and perhaps never use at all. And the raunchiness is important. It's a feature of the world we live in. What are people to one another? Too often, just vehicles for pleasure, and there is no reason to provide an elevated view of that. They are sexual organs, so named. But please be mindful of how tasteful I am. This is one of his less raunchy novels, and I try to stay classy. In one of Welbeck's later novels, Platform, his famous book about sexual tourism and the sexual revolution, I counted 7 sexual acts on one short page. This is the kind of research that could win me awards, perhaps. Atomized is not that raunchy, but it is rather raunchy. Let that suffice as an introduction. Let us now turn to part 1 of the book on the Lost Kingdom, where we see genuine people attached to the old order and the old ways, but who themselves were not able to pass on their ways.